We are live. It's the Revved Up 906 podcast, a Detroit Pistons podcast to be exact. And I'm Hudson.
And I'm Ryan.
And before we get into episode number 19 of season 3, y'all know the deal. Got to talk to you about a few quick things. First off, if you are new to the channel, make sure to like and subscribe. We would greatly appreciate that. And now that the Detroit Pistons season has officially wrapped up, we are going to be doing our yearly tradition of player evaluations. We're going to look up and down the roster, take time of the Pistons, take time to talk about each and every player, the standout stats, things we want to improve on, things we saw them improve on from last season, what they made a jump in, maybe what they slid back on, and what we want to see from them next season. And then we also give them a grade on their 2025 season performance. And so get ready for that. We're going to be doing Cade Cunningham, Jaden Ivey, Asar Thompson, Ron Holland in his rookie season, Marcus, even guys like Marcus Sasser. We're going to be talking about each and every one of them because there's a lot of different intricacies that go on with the personnel on the Detroit Pistons. And we love getting down into the knit and grit stats and really telling the story for each and every player and what happened this season. And as the Pistons look to grow and get better to make more playoff runs like they did this season, we're going to want to talk about certain things each player has to improve on for this Pistons team to keep taking those steps up to greatness. And so be along for the journey. So make sure to like and subscribe and then turn on that bell button on our profile. That is a push notifications button. So when we are uploading those player evaluations, you can be the first to know when we upload. So make sure to hit that bell button. We'd greatly appreciate it. And Ryan, we got a fun episode for the people this week, episode number 19 of season 3. Basically, we're going to be talking about our current takeaways from the Pistons versus Knicks matchup in round 1 of the Eastern Conference playoffs. And also just talk about current hot topics with the Detroit Pistons. A lot to talk about. Trajan Langdon just had his press conference to recap the 24-25 season. He had a lot to say about current happenings of the team, what he wants from the team moving forward. And then also we'll talk about Jalen Brunson and kind of the greatness he's doing right now and just playing at a high level and why the Pistons couldn't really keep up with the Knicks through the 6-game series. But first off, we're going to talk about the award races we saw through the beginning, through the end of this season. The Pistons and players and executive in the Pistons organization, we had 4 possible award race wins, and we lost all 4, unfortunately. And Malik Beasley tweeted about it when he lost. He took second place in Sixth Man of the Year. He said, "It's truly Detroit versus everybody. To have that many people up for rewards and go 0 for 4 is just absolutely nuts." So we saw JB take second in Coach of the Year race to Kenny Atkinson of the Cleveland Cavaliers. We saw Cade take second in Most Improved to Dyson Daniels, of all people. Trajan Langdon took third in Executive of the Year, and then Malik Beasley took second and Sixth Man of the Year to Peyton Pritchard. Ryan, as far as out of those 4 award races, what stands out the most to you? Because obviously JB had a historical season, but then Malik Beasley also had a historical 3-point season coming off the bench for the Pistons.
All right, so you pointed those 2 out, and I think those are the 2 that really needed to be pointed out. Cade with Most Improved Player, he didn't improve. He did improve. But this year, we expected him to do what he did. We didn't go into the season going like, oh, we have no idea what Cade is going to bring us. We knew what Cade was going to bring us, but we didn't know what he was going to add on to what his game was at already. So with that award, I'm perfectly fine with Cade not getting Most Improved Player. I actually kind of didn't want him to get that award anyways, because he isn't the most improved player. Like Dyson Daniels getting that award, yes, he's deserving of that award because he literally had, honestly, his nickname is the Great Barrier Reef, just because of being from down under. But like he literally had, in my opinion at least, and I think if you really broke down the stats, he had by far one of the best seasons defensively in NBA history. He was averaging darn near 4 steals to 5 steals a game. Like that's absurd. And
Mm-hmm.
especially in a game in which defense really doesn't matter anymore and it's more offensive driven. The fact that he was picking up 4 to 5 steals a game, like that's out of this world. And then even he was averaging 2 to 3 blocks a game too. On top of that, like he was just playing out of his mind, and so I
Yeah.
think he was very rewarding of that award. But so no, Cade getting that, he shouldn't have gotten that anyways. If anything, he should have been in the MVP race, not the MIP race. Um, as far as executive of the year, I'm not upset with that because if you really truly break down this roster and the additions that we had between last year and this year, there really isn't that big of a difference roster wise. And so realistically, I guess if you were to say executive of the year, you could throw Troy Weaver into that conversation still because the team that had so much success this year was single-handedly built by Troy Weaver, minus a couple add-ons from Trajan Langdon, and then even coaching-wise too. So it's I'm perfectly fine not getting that one. Malik Beasley had a very historic season, and to him not getting the sixth man of the year, because honestly, it didn't matter where he was in the rotation. He did not complain, and he would just come
Totally.
in and do his thing. So from that standpoint and the mindset that he had for this year, and then you add in the 3-point shooting, which is just absurd. Like there's not a lot of players that can do what he did this year. And the fact that he finished second in the most 3-pointers made this season, right behind Anthony Edwards, which Anthony Edwards realistically was intentionally playing just to break that, to just get the record for the year. So with that being said, like Malik Beasley should have gotten that award. The biggest one I will say out of all of them though is Coach of the Year. And I am absolutely ticked about it because if you look
Mm-hmm.
at the Cavaliers, it all started with JB. JB brought them to where they are right now. He didn't get
Yep.
the credit for where they are right now. He was the fall guy. He fell because they're like, yeah, we don't think we can win with him anymore. They could have. Honestly, JB with them this year, they could have been still on pace for what they're doing right now. Because they wouldn't have the roster didn't change a whole lot. They only
Yep.
made one big trade, and that was during the season this year, which they got Hunter out of
Yep.
Atlanta. So realistically, there wasn't much change to that roster this year. So JB, if Kenny Atkinson wins this award, JB taking second place for the Pistons head coach to be taking first place for the Cavaliers head coach too. So I think JB pretty much knows. Yeah, I know I got snubbed as far as the Pistons go, but as far as the overall award goes, I think he knows darn well that it is his to win because like you look at that team, what JB did from the get go, because LeBron
Mm-hmm.
leaves, JB comes in, and that team is absolutely atrocious. Like there's nothing
Oh
there.
yeah.
And then even the first couple of years of getting Colin Sexton and Darius Garland to actually play together and work together. And then Colin Sexton gets shipped out. You have Lowry Markkinen in the mix there from time to time too. He gets shipped out. Then you bring in a whole new era with Evan Mobley, and then everybody's just trying to fit together. Jared Allen was with Kenny Atkinson in Brooklyn, and obviously that worked. But even coming to Cleveland, he had to work with Evan Mobley also, and that just butting
Mm-hmm.
heads initially early on. But JB brought all those guys together like he did here in Detroit, and it's evident because you can see his philosophy and his mindset and just his creative ability as a coach in Cleveland, and you can see it in Detroit. And so to me, that award should be or should have been JB's. But honestly, we all know, and every just person in the NBA knows that it actually truly was JB's award, no matter what, first or second, because Cleveland was his team and this is his team now. So I think he did get the award, even though he didn't get the reward. But as far as those goes, I really think the coaching one is the biggest. Everything else, I'm fine with the result, but Beasley should have gotten the sixth man of the year.
Yeah, and no other coach has tripled a team's win in the introductory season of their stint with a fellow team. And so they made history And I think that it might have been JB's award if they brought the Knicks to 7 games. Obviously, it's a shoulda, coulda, woulda kind of situation, but I think it would have showed NBA award voters that, like, okay, JB's got that coaching factor. And I think as Pistons fans, we know it because we see the turnaround and we've seen the Pistons coached under some rough coaches. And to see that flip and it was so visual, it was so right there in front of you, drastic. Um, and how good he coached these Pistons and these young guys in particular. He's not coaching a bunch of vets out there. He's coaching very young, impressionable 19, 20, 21-year-old players. And to do what he did with Jalen Duren, and we saw a visual jump he made after his first 25 games of this season as a 22-year-old and really compete with the NBA's best at 5. And Jaden Ivey have a big turnaround season before his injury. And at the time when those switches, visual switches, as fans watching the game were happening, we couldn't help but say it was because of JB Bickerstaff and what he was doing behind the scenes with this team. And it just really hurts to see him not win that award. And I know other Pistons fans think that too. But when you have a platform, you got to talk about it because it was just a very frustrating situation. And I think Kenny Atkinson and the Cavs did something great, winning the Eastern Conference, but it still really hurts. Let's kind of switch the topic a little bit and talk about what transpired in the 6 games the Pistons had against the New York Knicks in the first round of the Eastern Conference playoffs. And Ryan, obviously, our expectations were blown out of the water at the beginning of the season when we were doing the 24-25 season preview. We said, hey, play-in situation would be great. And then they go on to get the 6th seed in the Eastern Conference. And so I think heading into the playoffs, we were both of the mindset, hey, everything's kind of gravy at this point. Whatever happens, happens. But then the Pistons force 6 games and show, hey, we can be competitive with these Knicks. I think we were just absolutely thrilled with transpired. But what we saw was just Jalen Brunson kind of picking it up a notch. And we kind of suspected that he would do that because he plays so well when the bright lights are on in Madison Square Garden. But then also a lot of key role players came into effect for this New York Knicks team to really solidify them and getting them to the second round. A guy that stood out to me that really hurt the Pistons was OG Anunoby, and he was somebody I wanted the Pistons to bring in when we were looking to solve the Tobias Harris role, the Asar Thompson role before Asar kind of came into his own. And so it kind of stinks we never ended up getting OG because then months after that, those conversations are happening of, okay, are we going to make a move for OG? Then he's hurt us in the first round of the playoffs. But, obviously Brunson, OG, Karl Anthony Towns played a lot better than I suspected. I'm not a cat guy, Ryan. I don't know about you. I've never been a Karl Anthony Towns fan. I've never really been impressed by him, but some of the plays he was making were key plays for the New York Knicks against this scrappy Pistons team. What kind of stood out to you in some of these, those 6 games?
So those first couple games there, I was thinking to myself, obviously game 1, we should have won. We should have.
Yep.
Game 2, we get that. Game 3, we should have won. But needless to say, we should have won the series. But those first couple games there, it was evident that we were the better team. And the only reason, and I will say, we can't always just blame the officiating because the officials are always put in a tough position because obviously you can't see everything. You show the replay, there's going to be some things that somebody doesn't see because at the end of the day, nobody is perfect. Nobody can ever be perfect. So because of that, you kind of go into the mindset of like, okay, let me put myself in those guys' shoes. Like if I were to be in that position on the sideline making that call, would I have made that call or would I have not? And then it comes to it's just there's a lot going on. And in any game, it doesn't matter what level it's at, whether it's middle school up to high school, college, etc. There's always going to be something that's missed that you kind of were like, ooh, maybe I should have made that call. or maybe I shouldn't have done that. Like, there's always going to be one of those things. So as far as officiating goes, yes, was the officiating terrible? Absolutely. It was atrocious. But you can always think of, okay, did the Pistons put themselves in the position to have the officiating matter? Yes, they did.
Right.
In two of those games where we had very controversial calls at the end, yes, they should have gone our way. They absolutely should have. But when you think of the multiple runs that the Knicks went on to lead into that situation, for us to come down to the last couple seconds to hit a shot or get a call our way, those shouldn't have taken place. If we would have just followed the game plan, not rushed our shots, slowed down the offense slightly, and just played our brand of basketball, we would have won those games. And we wouldn't even be talking about this right now because we'd be in the second round against the Celtics. And so yes, the officiating was terrible, but our play at the end of the games when it really mattered the most fell through. And why was that? You look up and down this roster, and I was talking to my dad about this. I was talking to you about this. There's a lot of these guys on this team that are for sure players for the future, and there are some players that are for sure going to be getting the door shut on them. And it's obvious on a couple of them, and it's less obvious on a couple of them also. But I will say the playoffs showed what our flaw was too, outside of just our play at the end of games, closing that out. That issue gets addressed in the offseason. That's not going to be an issue from here on out. We'll be able to close out games because JB is a phenomenal coach. He'll be able to address that. As far as roster shape up and whatnot, the weakest spot of our team was evident, and it was the big man's position. Not even just the five, it was the four. The four is our weakest spot in our rotation. Tobias, I love Tobias, but he's not a four. He's a three. He's a three that can play the four. That's what he is. And then you even look as far as like, okay, Stu is realistically a four, but he's just a man amongst boys, so he's going to play the five. And then you have Paul Reed. Paul Reed is fantastic in the playoffs, terrible in the regular season. But with that being said, he's more of a four than a five, but he plays the five because he's a man amongst boys. And so then you go down the list. Bobby Clintman, let's be honest, he's not a four. He's a three that can play the four. You have Tolu Smith, two-way contract player, doesn't really matter. That's not going to go there. Lindy Waters, not even a four, but oftentimes ends up playing the four. He's a three. Asar Thompson could play the four if needed, but he's a three. So the point is, like, we don't, and I mean, throw Simone Fontecchio in that mix too. He's a three that can play the four, but he shouldn't be playing the four. The point is, we don't have a clear and evident four man right now. We have 1, 2, 3, and 5. We don't have 4. That was our biggest weakness because when it all came down to things, you'd have a situation where it's like, okay, who do we match up Cat with? Because the obvious answer to me is like Jalen Duren. You throw Jalen Duren on Cat. But then it's like you bring Tom Thibodeau brought Mitchell Robinson into the game, and it's like, okay, crap. What do you do in that situation when you have Mitchell Robinson, who is 7 foot plus, and Cat, who is 7 foot? Like, what do you do in that situation? And obviously, Mitchell Robinson is more of a rebounding big than Cat is, and Cat's more offensive minded than Mitchell Robinson is. And so then it's kind of like, in that regard, you would still keep Duren on Cat, but then who would be matched up against Mitchell Robinson? And then Stu, it wasn't even a factor because he didn't even play. But even if you did throw Stu in that mix, Stu guarding a 7-footer in Mitchell Robinson, how is that going to work?
Right.
Or just the fact that we had Paul Reed. Paul Reed can't match up against Mitchell Robinson. And it was obvious. Every single game, it'd be like, what the heck? What is going on right now? Like, how is Mitchell Robinson out rebounding everyone out there? So I think just the overall series, the closing out games we can fix, the overall experience. That was our first playoff appearance since 2018. So it's been a while. But I think the biggest issue with our playoff appearance this year was the fact that it showed our weakness in the four position. We can close out games. That's something you can fix. As far as turnovers goes, that's another thing. But I think those stats and all those things, closing out games, turnovers, whatnot, that can get fixed easily. But when it comes to the overall shape up of the roster, that's when it comes into question. I think we handled Cat just as well as we could have handled him. Honestly, he really wasn't a factor. OG Anunoby in the initial games wasn't really a factor, but then when it came to the ending of the series, he was pretty much the go-to guy outside of Brunson. Brunson, I thought we handled poorly in the beginning, but at the end of the series, we started to really take a stand on him. Um, as far as like Mikal Bridges really wasn't a factor, and I like that. But he did give the Knicks a quiet 17 night in, night out. Josh Hart wasn't a factor, which is good because I can't stand Josh Hart. But overall, I think the series was good. I think it definitely showed a lot of our weaknesses, but something that Trajan can easily build upon come next year.
Yeah, and what's nice when talking about who to add for the four position is okay, we got Tobias heading into next season. We don't have to worry about him. Maybe you try to trade up in the draft and go get a solid four who can sit under Tobias for a season. And then in his sophomore season, once we probably move on from Tobias, can come into that starting role position. The only issue with that is it's not going to be an immediate um, impact situation where the Pistons are in a very different situation heading into this next season. They are kind of in like, okay, we can win now. Like, we don't really have to keep building this team. So it just depends on what flavor you want. Do you want to add in that another young guy at the four position who's a borderline 7-footer who can make the three ball score at all three levels? Um, that's a big choice to make, or you go out and try to make a trade for a solid forward position like a Cam Johnson or a Jabari Smith or a guy like that, because what we do know, and I like Isaiah Stewart, he played very good for us, and it was a big issue not having him the rest of the series. We just know that he's not dominant against other starting fours and fives. He's very, very, very good off the bench, and that's where he belongs. He has his role there in the second unit. So I don't really want to see him get any starting four minutes above Tobias. I think Tobias is fine, but when you get into a playoff situation, which he played abnormally well, Harris, this series against the Knicks. I don't know why it was. I don't know if Cat is just lazy. Josh Hart is too small at the power forward position. I don't know what it is, but Tobias played very well, but we can't expect him to play like that over an 82 game schedule or into the playoffs. It has to be addressed, and how you want to go about it, there's multiple ways. We have some young assets that we could trade for in a draft situation, or trade with in a draft situation. So we have some assets we can use and trade away, or you look to address it in a trade with a fellow NBA player. And it just depends on what Trajan's thinking. If he thinks he can get his money worth in a Tobias Harris, then maybe you do take a power forward at pick 37 like they have in this year's draft. But as we know, the draft stock is slowly dropping with NIL taking shape in the NCAA. So it's going to be interesting to see what they do. All I have to say on that is I trust Trajan Langdon. He made a lot of great moves right away this last offseason. So we have nothing but high expectations for what he does again this offseason. One takeaway from me in this playoff series was the inexperience of Asar Thompson was on display in this series. I'm not necessarily an Asar Thompson fan. I'm not saying this because he got his ankles broken by Brunson on that last possession of the Knicks. I'm not saying it because of that. I don't. put that on Asar. That's just a play. Brunson just made a great play. My issue with Asar was he had a lot of 50-50 balls that could have been his rebounds, could have been his going and getting the ball on the baseline, and he just simply didn't put his body on the line. I don't know if he was nervous to have fouls. I don't know if he was so focused on Brunson that he couldn't get outside of the Brunson bubble. But when you talk about a guy like Asar Thompson, an effort guy, a defensive guy, those 50-50 balls that, we talk about Dennis Rodman, that was what he was so great at on the Bad Boys era, those tapping for the ball, getting those big rebounds. There was I believe in those 6 games, there was about 20 situations where the ball is a couple of feet from Asar and he just didn't go and put 2 hands on it and start the fast break. And I'm just like, what? I don't know if the inexperience has him within this Asar Brunson bubble that could have been easily it. It just was very evident that, like, okay, one, he's not giving us 20 a game, which we know he can't really do that yet. Hopefully one day he will. But if he can't give you 20, he at least has to have those effort plays so that then he's getting that plus minus a little bit better. That was one of my biggest things. It's not something I'm necessarily worried about for the future because you can tell Asar's a hard worker. Asar is, so he's going to keep getting better. But in this playoff scenario, he just didn't quite meet the mark for me. Ryan, was there any other takeaways as far as matchup wise against the Knicks? Because, like you said, they guarded Brunson pretty well with Asar. Deuce McBride didn't have like a 25-point game like I thought he might. There's a couple Knicks guys that I thought would burn us and didn't. And any other takeaways as far as that series?
The only other thing that I would add is, as far as Tom Thibodeau and his bench goes, I mean, obviously we knew going into the series that the bench wasn't going to be a thing for the Knicks, because Thibodeau usually only goes 6 guys deep and that's it, if that. And so because of that, it really wasn't an issue for us. I mean, Cam Payne did burn us in that one game, but outside of him, like, he disappeared the rest of the series. Deuce McBride didn't do a whole lot either. He had a couple of threes in each of the games, but it was just a couple threes. It wasn't like he was really burning us. But then I will say, as far as the matchup goes, the Knicks did struggle with fouling, and that to me is like, oh, imagine if we had Stu in there. Just imagine, because if Stu was in there, Stu is gonna chirp, and because of that, Cat all series long was giving Tobias crap. If he's giving Tobias crap, if Stu's playing, oh my goodness, I can't imagine what could have taken place, because that just would have resulted in Cat getting thrown out, and that would have been fantastic. And honestly, that one game there where Cat fouls out, obviously that's game 6. Cat fouls out, and then Brunson has to pretty much take full reign. Honestly, I think it hurt us that Cat fouled out in that situation, because then Brunson's sitting there going like, "Yep, it's just me. I don't have to worry about anyone else. I can keep the ball in my hands. I don't have to worry about Mikel. I don't have to worry about it. It all relied upon him, and that's why it hurts me that Asar got his ankles broken, because it's like Asar knows in that situation it's literally me. Like, I can't screw this up, because otherwise that's game. And then he screwed it up. But I will say, before the ankles got broken, there was a push off from Brunson, but he was pushing off all game long. So it's kind of like, if you're not calling it before, you're kind of not going to call it now in crunch time. But overall, I went into this series going, as long as we can win 2 games, I am thrilled. 2 games. And we did decently well, honestly. And I knew going into the playoffs, maybe we're not going to do much, but as long as we can take the Knicks to 6 games, like after going 14 wins last year to 6 games against the Knicks, that's fantastic. So as far as the series goes, I think even though we didn't win, I think we won.
Well, and to me, there was a noticeable jump the Pistons made in play style. they played a lot better than when we were in Detroit when they were playing against the Kings and the Grizzlies. Like that was not the same team we saw in this 6 game series with the Knicks. They took it up a notch. They stepped up to the occasion. Yeah, it didn't go their way in 6 games, but in the end, they played at a high level, really competed, and they're putting, the Pistons' name back on the map as far as NBA nationally and in Detroit. So I'm very proud of the team for doing that. And as far as Detroit personalities and where their head is at in Detroit media, Natalie Kerwin had a great quote following the Detroit Pistons season. I know we got some Natalie Kerwin fans listening. She said on Twitter, "Win or lose, what this Pistons team did this season is phenomenal. The only team in NBA history to triple their win total from the season prior, 14 wins to 44 wins. The growth, the chemistry, to even make the playoffs the first time since 2019 was outstanding. This group will, in all uppercase, be back." End quote from Natalie Kerwin on X. So obviously, Detroit media is kind of turning their heads around on this Pistons team with everything going on with the Lions and the Tigers. Um, the Pistons are now, a team that's worth respect and attention in Detroit, and that's great to see, especially as longtime Pistons fans like we are. Before we wrap up today's episode, we got 2 minutes left. I want to talk about Trajan Langdon's press conference with the media earlier today, Wednesday, May 7th. He basically gave a press conference wrapping up his thoughts on the 24-25 season, and the media asked a lot of questions from what his perspective is heading into the draft, with a lot of names, guys pulling their names out of the draft to go follow NIL money in the NCAA, to what could happen possibly in trades, what players stood out to him, who he wants to step up. And he basically said, "We had a heck of a season. I'm thrilled. That's great to see." He's not really a big emotional guy, but to see that he was visibly excited about what the Pistons accomplished as a fan was great to see. And then we also heard him say that the Pistons will more than likely not make a move in free agency other than picking up, hopefully, some of their vets. He said, though, if the Pistons make a move, it will be via trade. So a lot of talk is picking up about obviously needing to fill that 4 position, like me and Ryan mentioned before. A lot of names being thrown out, weirdly enough, like Kevin Durant and Devin Booker. I don't know the probability of these things happening, but I do know that it would have to happen via trade. So it's kind of interesting. Trajan's like, "Yeah, I'm not really looking at free agency, but trades though, I'm interested." So it was interesting to see have him talk about that. Um, and when talking about resigning the vets, Dennis Schroeder, Malik Beasley, Tim Hardaway Jr., he said that it has to be a two-person conversation. He is not going to try to wrangle them. He said they will be getting other deals thrown out at them, but if they want to come back, he will more than be more than happy to make something happen. But he said it has to be a two-person conversation. I assume Trajan said that to kind of save his back if he isn't able to re-sign Malik, Hardaway, Schroeder. Basically because it will be hard to re-sign those 3 guys, especially because they played so well in the playoffs. I could see them going and getting a pretty solid contract from a contending team, but I think that it very much seemed like Trajan wants to go and get those guys. He thinks they're high quality guys. I know for me, as far as who I want to see back the most, Malik Beasley's on the top of that list. I'm a big Schroeder guy after this Knicks Pistons series. I thought he added a great dynamic to the Pistons. Tim Hardaway Jr., I kind of go back and forth on. Obviously, I love him because he's a Michigan guy, but it's hard to say with him. I just don't really see him coming back, unfortunately. But obviously, you hope to see all 3 of them come back. Ryan, obviously, is Malik at the top of that list as far as returning free agents for you?
Oh, absolutely. It's not
Yeah.
even close, without question.
So, any final thoughts before we wrap up episode number 19 of season 3?
I will say it would be fantastic to bring all 3 back. I think all 3 do deserve a spot on this team.
Yeah.
And I think obviously you take all three out of the mix and you look at the roster, the way it shapes up to be next year without any moves, free agency wise or draft wise, we have a lot of holes if all three go. And I think all
Oh,
three know that. I think Tim definitely has found a home. I think Malik has found a home, and I think Schroeder's found a home. And you'll go through any other team that they've been a part of. Dennis, as an example, literally got traded once again at the
yeah.
deadline. He's been traded literally every single season, pretty much of his entire career, which sucks. Um, but I think he's finally found his spot. And but out of the three, I think he would be the one that doesn't end up back in Detroit. But I don't think he wants to get traded again. So I think he'd come back. Um, Malik, obviously, I want him back because just his ability to bounce between being in the starting lineup to off the bench. It didn't matter where
Yep.
or when you put him in the game, he was going to succeed. And obviously, he had a little bit of a cold spell to end the playoffs there, which sucked because you go from the regular season where he'd be going from 10 to 20 to 26 around there to the playoffs where he's not even getting 10. He's getting like 7 or 9 or whatever. So I think just he's very hungry. He's very committed to Detroit, and I think he does come back, even if it's on a bigger contract. Tim Hardaway Jr., I do want him back, just because when we needed him the most to be in the starting lineup to fill in for Ivy, he was fantastic. He
Oh
did
yeah.
exactly what we needed him to do, and then some. And then Schroeder in the regular season there to close out the season. Obviously, we had him at the trade deadline. So he only got like 20 games with us. But in those 20 games, that was him establishing relationships with his teammates. And then the playoffs were him applying those relationships that he had built up and going on from there. And so realistically, I think the 20 games, you can really just throw that out there because it didn't have an impact in those 20 games necessarily. But you look at the playoffs as a whole, he stepped up time and time again. And so just the way he stepped up and the way he worked with everyone, it didn't again with him and all three, it didn't matter whether or not they were in the starting lineup, coming off the bench, coming in
Yeah.
with 2 minutes to spare. It did not matter. They were going to have success. And that's just fantastic because those are the three kind of all three, honestly. That's the kind of basketball you want from your players. It doesn't matter when or where they go, they have success. So as far as the possibility of bringing those three back, I think Malik is obviously the top priority, but I think it's 1A, 1B as far, well, 2A, 2B as far as it goes with Tim Hardaway Jr. and Dennis Schroeder. But I would love to have all three back because all three old heads with Tobias in there mixing well with the young guys. It's fun to watch because whether or not you're watching the game to watch the game or you're just scrolling on Instagram post game waiting for the Pistons social media to just upload some stuff so you can just watch the guys be buddies and whatnot.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just they all came together, and I think this is just a stepping stone. If they all come back, I think they all know darn well that next year the sky is the limit. Obviously, maybe not championship or bust, but I think at least second round of the playoffs come next year.
And what all three add is a professionalism and a consistency that some of our young players playing alongside those seasoned vets can learn a lot from, and it will pay off for the future. You're basically investing in your young guys when you have solid vets around that aren't hotheads. They stay within themselves, especially in those big games, like at Game 7 versus the New York Knicks. That will do it for episode number 19 of season 3. Make sure to like and subscribe and be out on the lookout for our player evaluation series, as we will be breaking down each and every player and what they did this season, looking into the nit and grit stats and grading them at the end of each and every episode. So make sure to turn on your post notifications button. We will see you guys in the next episode. Peace.